Hello, brothers, and welcome to Sigma Old Man channel. People will stare. Make it worth their while. Harry Winston. It sounds like a compliment until you realize, in some cases, it's not about beauty, status, or even fame. It's about disruption. Studies show the average human attention span is shorter than a goldfish's, yet somehow Sigma males manage to hold a room's focus without even trying. They don't announce themselves, they don't perform, but when they walk in, heads turn as if someone just hit pause on reality. Is it charisma? Not quite. Is it intimidation sometimes? Or maybe it's that unnerving mix of calm detachment and quiet confidence that makes people stare like they're watching a tiger lounge in the middle of a coffee shop. You want to look away, but you just can't. Today we're peeling back the curtain on 20 hidden, brutally honest reasons everyone stares at Sigma males. And trust me, it's not the boring stuff you've heard before.
Number 1. They're a social glitch people want to reboot. A Sigma male in a social setting is like a line of code in a program that doesn't behave the way the rest of the system expects. Everyone else follows predictable social scripts. The laughs at the right cues, the nods of approval, the polite small talk to smooth over silences. This is how human interaction runs by default. Then, without trying, a Sigma disrupts that flow. He doesn't sync his reactions to the room, doesn't follow the emotional rhythm, and doesn't slot himself neatly into the existing hierarchy. The effect is subtle, but the human brain is wired to spot anomalies. When something or someone doesn't match the pattern, our attention snaps to it like a cursor blinking on a frozen screen. This is why the staring happens. People aren't consciously thinking, "That's a Sigma male, I should watch him." Instead, they're subconsciously trying to reconcile the glitch. The way he's not overly invested in being liked, the way his movements don't signal neediness or urgency, the way his presence seems unaffected by the group's mood. All of it sends the brain into low-level analysis mode. The eyes keep returning, hoping to decode the behavior. What makes this more compelling is that Sigma males don't fix the glitch. Most people, when they sense they're standing out too much, either soften their edges to blend in or exaggerate themselves to claim dominance. A Sigma does neither. He stays exactly as he is, which only deepens the puzzle. The longer the brain can't solve it, the more it checks back. That's the loop, an endless cycle of observation and recalculation that keeps eyes locked on him. There's also a strange social discomfort that comes with unpredictability. People prefer knowing where others stand in the hierarchy and what role they play. The Sigma's refusal to declare a role or even play the game at all destabilizes that comfort. It's as if he's running on his own private operating system while everyone else is on Windows and no one has the password to log in. So the stares aren't just about attraction or admiration, they're the human mind trying to resolve an error it can't debug. And for the Sigma male, that's the power, being the kind of presence that compels attention without ever asking for it. Number 2, they never overreact to being watched. Most people betray the fact that they know they're being observed. They either tense up and shrink away, or they turn it into a performance. Louder laughs, bigger gestures, exaggerated movements. A Sigma doesn't do either. If eyes land on him, he doesn't shift his posture, change his tone, or offer a performance for the audience. He simply continues existing exactly as before. That absence of reaction does two things at once. It denies the watcher any payoff for catching him, but it also removes the discomfort that usually breaks eye contact. Humans are used to a cause and effect loop in social attention. I look, you react. With a Sigma, that loop is broken. The watcher gets no flicker of self-consciousness to signal, "You've been caught," nor do they get the reward of watching someone lean into the spotlight. Instead, they're left in a strange middle ground where their gaze feels unnoticed but not unwelcome. That state makes it surprisingly easy to keep looking. The effect is subtle but potent. When someone doesn't flinch or overcompensate, it sends a signal of self-possession. The Sigma isn't rejecting attention, but he's not feeding it either. It's a kind of social neutrality that paradoxically draws more of it, because people are drawn to what doesn't respond predictably. The more unshaken he seems, the more others want to watch. Not out of malice, but out of curiosity. There's also an unspoken challenge in it. In most interactions, if someone's being watched for too long, they eventually try to reclaim control of the moment. A quick joke, a question, or a reciprocal look. The Sigma doesn't do that. He's comfortable enough to let the moment stretch without resolution. That lingering space makes it easier for the onlooker to keep their gaze, because nothing is being done to push them away or pull them in. In a strange way, it becomes a safe dynamic for the watcher. No threat, no invitation, just a calm, steady presence that doesn't change under observation. And that kind of unshaken stillness, especially in a world where everyone is hyper-aware of how they're perceived, feels rare enough that people want to keep staring just to see if it will ever break. And number 3, they're an unsolved equation. The human mind is wired to look for patterns and slot people into them quickly. It's a survival instinct. Figure out who's in charge, who's submissive, who's a threat, and who's safe. Most people give away their position in the social hierarchy almost immediately through posture, tone, facial expressions, or the way they interact with others. But a Sigma male doesn't hand over those clues. He's not puffing himself up to project dominance, nor is he shrinking to signal submission. He's simply there, composed, self-contained, and unreadable. That blank space in the social equation is maddening for the brain. When we can't classify someone, we keep mentally circling them, running different if-then scenarios to try and fit them into a category. Is he confident or detached, friendly or cold? A leader who hasn't stepped forward yet, or an observer who doesn't care to lead at all? Because the Sigma isn't broadcasting a clear identity, the questions stack up with no satisfying answer. This is why people keep staring. It's not always conscious. It's the brain doing what it's designed to do, scanning for missing information. The Sigma becomes a puzzle, and like any unsolved puzzle, it draws focus until it's solved, except in his case, it rarely is. That's part of the intrigue. There's no final reveal, no moment when the mask drops. The person you see is exactly what he chooses to show, nothing more. The other factor is that his neutrality in body language is deceptive. People expect those who don't assert dominance to naturally slide into a more submissive role. But a Sigma's stillness doesn't feel submissive. It feels grounded, like he's entirely in control of himself. That contradiction short-circuits the usual social reading process, forcing observers to take longer, sharper looks just to recalibrate. The longer they look, the more they realize they're no closer to decoding him. And that's where fascination turns into fixation. For most, it's uncomfortable not to figure someone out. For the Sigma, it's the perfect way to hold attention without saying or doing anything at all. Number 4, they stand still when others squirm. In moments of tension, most people instinctively try to release the discomfort through movement. They shuffle their feet, adjust their clothes, tap their fingers, glance at their phones, all tiny escapes from the awkwardness of stillness. It's a social reflex, a way to signal, I'm fine, I'm doing something, don't focus on me. A Sigma male doesn't join that escape pattern. When the air gets heavy, he stays still, not stiff, not frozen, just calm and unmoving, as if the tension belongs to someone else entirely. That stillness becomes magnetic because it's so rare. In a room full of small, jittery motions, the person who isn't moving becomes the point of stability. Eyes keep drifting back to him the way you'd glance at a fixed landmark in a shifting crowd. It's not even a conscious decision. The brain is drawn to the anchor, the one stable point that offers a visual break from the noise of movement. There's also something unsettling about it. Stillness under pressure reads as control, and control hints at power. Most people aren't used to being around someone who refuses to flinch when the atmosphere gets tense. That unspoken power makes them curious, maybe even a little uneasy. They want to see if his composure will crack, so they keep checking. The Sigma's stillness also plays a subtle psychological trick. It slows down how others perceive time in his presence. When everyone else is speeding up with nervous energy and one person is moving at a different pace or not moving at all, it creates the sense that he's existing on his own timeline. That difference alone makes people want to keep observing to see what he'll do next. And often that's the point. He doesn't do anything next. He lets the tension belong to others while he remains unaffected. The longer he holds that posture, the more he becomes a quiet focal point, not because he's demanding attention, but because his lack of reaction forces everyone else to supply it. In a room full of squirming, the one who stays still will always be the one who's remembered. Number 5, they don't broadcast need. Most people give off small, almost invisible cues that they're looking for something from others. It could be a certain tone of voice that seeks approval, a smile that lingers a little too long, a posture that leans in for connection, or even the way they glance around to check if anyone is noticing them. These are micro-broadcasts of need, the quiet social currency that keeps interactions running. A Sigma male doesn't send those signals. He's not fishing for validation, scanning for allies, or trying to prove he belongs. His presence says, without words, I'm fine as I am, whether you respond to me or not. That absence of want is rare, and because it's rare, it's instantly noticeable. In a world where most people's body language is a soft plea for something, attention, safety, reassurance, encountering someone who isn't asking for anything at all is jarring. This reversal of the usual social dynamic flips the script in people's minds. We're used to gauging others based on what they seem to want from us and deciding how to respond. With a Sigma, there's nothing to respond to, no hook to grab onto. That creates a low-level tension because humans are wired to measure relationships through exchange. When the exchange feels one-sided, when he's not offering need in return, the brain can't file it under a familiar category. That's where the magnetism comes in. People often mistake needlessness for independence and independence for strength. Without meaning to, the Sigma projects a kind of self-sufficiency that feels both admirable and intimidating. It's not arrogance. It's just the absence of the small, constant bids for attention that most people make without realizing it. And because he's not chasing approval, others end up giving it more freely. The irony is that the very thing that makes him seem detached is also what draws people in. His lack of ask becomes a challenge. They want to know what it would take to get a reaction, to get acknowledgement, to break through that calm wall. And the longer they try to figure it out, the longer they keep watching him, not realizing that his lack of need is exactly what's keeping their attention hooked. Number 6, their gaze feels like a measurement. When most people make eye contact, it's a quick social exchange, a glance to acknowledge presence, a smile to signal friendliness, or a nod to show agreement. With a Sigma male, the gaze works differently. It's not hurried, and it's not purely social. It has weight, as if he's not just looking at you, but through you, quietly assessing. It feels less like casual attention and more like evaluation, the way a craftsman might inspect the quality of a tool before deciding if it's worth using. This quality can be deeply unsettling because it flips the usual power dynamic. In most interactions, people unconsciously measure each other and then hide that judgment behind polite cues. With a Sigma, the filtering isn't there. His eyes don't rush to soften the moment or reassure you. Instead, there's a calm steadiness that says he's absorbing details, how you stand, how you speak, the truth behind your words, without offering an immediate verdict. That's why people keep watching him after the moment passes. There's a lingering question. What did he see? What did he decide? Humans are wired to seek approval. And when we don't know whether we've been accepted or dismissed, it eats at us. The Sigma's gaze creates that uncertainty, and uncertainty is a powerful magnet for attention. It's also different from intimidation. He's not glaring to establish dominance or staring to provoke discomfort. If anything, the neutrality of his expression makes the effect stronger because there's no obvious intent to latch onto. You can't tell whether he's impressed, skeptical, or indifferent, and the absence of that clarity makes people hyper-aware of themselves in his presence. Over time, this kind of gaze builds a reputation. People might describe him as someone who sees too much or can't be fooled, even if they can't point to a specific incident. And the truth is, they're not wrong. A Sigma isn't wasting his attention. If his eyes are on you, it means you're being mentally filed somewhere. That quiet awareness turns a simple glance into something charged, making others circle back, both literally and mentally, to figure out exactly where they stand with him. Number 7. They don't hide between actions. Most people have 2 modes in social settings, the on mode, where they're speaking, laughing, or actively engaging, and the off mode, where they retreat into the background until it's their turn again. During those off moments, they shrink a little, posture softens, eye contact drops, expressions fade. It's the body's way of saying, don't mind me right now. It's almost like hitting the dimmer switch on their presence. A Sigma male doesn't do that. Even in complete silence, even when he's not participating in the conversation, he holds the same level of presence as if he were speaking. His posture remains deliberate, his awareness sharp, his attention engaged. There's no fade out, no retreat into invisibility. It's as if his presence is on a steady broadcast, whether he's active or still. This constant presence works like a psychological highlighter. The human eye is drawn to things that stay consistent amid shifting surroundings. In a room where everyone's energy ebbs and flows depending on whether they're in the spotlight, the Sigma's steady state becomes an anchor point. People keep glancing back, not because he's doing something dramatic, but because he isn't disappearing like everyone else does in between their moments. It also changes the way others experience the space. His refusal to switch off can make people more self-conscious, as though they're always being observed, even when they're not. That subtle pressure can shift group dynamics without him saying a word. People may find themselves adjusting their behavior in his presence simply because they sense that unbroken awareness. What's powerful here is that this isn't performative. He's not trying to maintain a strong presence. It's just how he naturally moves through a space. He doesn't need the stage to be visible, and that in itself disrupts the usual rhythm of attention. When someone's presence doesn't flicker, it becomes a fixed point in the social landscape. Others can't help but track it, check in on it, and try to gauge it. And that's why the Sigma holds attention even in his quietest moments. His stillness between actions isn't an absence. It's an unbroken statement that he's there, fully all the time. Number 8, they look at the room like an outsider. Most people scan a room with a purpose that's rooted in social navigation. They're looking for familiar faces, gauging who seems approachable, checking where they might fit in. It's a subtle hunt for connection, approval, or an opening to join the flow of interaction. A Sigma male's scan is different. He's not looking for a place in the hierarchy or a moment to insert himself. His eyes move like he's gathering information, not social currency. This shift in intent is what makes his gaze stand out. He's taking in the exits, the spacing between people, the way conversations cluster, the body language that reveals who's tense, who's comfortable, and who's pretending. It's not paranoia, it's awareness. He's building a mental map of the environment the same way someone might read a page before deciding what's worth highlighting. And because his scanning isn't tethered to the usual "am I fitting in" mindset, there's a detachment to it that people can feel. That detachment creates a strange dual sensation in others. They feel observed, but not necessarily in a personal way. More like they're part of the overall data set. And yet that kind of observation carries its own weight. When someone looks at you as part of a bigger picture instead of the focal point, it can make you oddly curious about what they're seeing and why it matters. There's also a quiet challenge in the way he observes. Without the social subtext most people use, the smile, the nod, the brief eye contact that says you're safe, the Sigma leaves the meaning of his attention open-ended. That ambiguity makes people hyper-aware of themselves, wondering if they've passed some invisible test, or if they've been mentally filed away as irrelevant. Over time, this outsider's scan builds a certain mystique. It's the difference between someone looking at a painting for pleasure and someone studying it for flaws, composition, and hidden details. People can sense when they're being looked at in that second way, and it makes them want to keep watching him back. Not to connect, but to figure out what he's seeing and why it feels like he might be seeing more than they want to reveal. Number 9, they dress in a way that doesn't seek alignment. Most people dress with at least some subconscious nod to a group identity. Whether it's following the latest trend, matching a certain subculture, or mirroring the style of people around them, clothing often serves as a quiet "I belong here" signal. Even those who claim they don't care about fashion usually end up aligning with a visual tribe without realizing it. A Sigma male style works differently. He's not dressing to fit into a category or to send a deliberate social message. His choices are based on personal function, preference, and his own internal logic. That's why it doesn't feel like rebellion. Rebellion is still a reaction to the mainstream, still tethered to the thing it's pushing against. The Sigma's independence in style isn't a protest, it's detachment. He simply wears what aligns with his standards, whether that's a perfectly tailored jacket he's worn for a decade or a plain shirt that happens to feel right. The result is clothing that doesn't quite sync with any of the existing tribes in the room, which creates a subtle visual dissonance. That dissonance catches attention because the human mind is quick to categorize people based on appearance. Fashion shorthand helps us decide, often within seconds, whether someone is creative, corporate, athletic, rebellious, or conventional. When those cues don't match any familiar template, the brain stalls. The observer keeps looking, scanning for context, trying to reconcile the mismatch. This effect is amplified by the fact that the Sigma usually wears his choices with complete ease. There's no awkwardness that suggests he's testing a new look, no exaggerated pride that screams, "Notice me." It's just him. And because he's not obviously seeking validation, the lack of effort becomes intriguing in itself. Over time, people notice that his style seems immune to the ebb and flow of trends. While others update their wardrobes to match the season's colors or the latest influencer's aesthetic, the Sigma stays consistent, not stuck but grounded. That quiet consistency sends a different kind of signal. Here is someone whose identity isn't swayed by what everyone else is doing. And in a world addicted to visual belonging, that kind of self-directed presentation stands out without needing to shout. Number 10, their reactions lag intentionally. In most conversations, people respond almost instantly. A laugh right after the punchline, a nod before the other person even finishes speaking, a quick aha to keep the rhythm flowing. It's a social reflex designed to show attentiveness and keep interactions smooth. A Sigma male breaks that rhythm. When something happens, a question, a joke, a surprising statement, he doesn't jump in with an immediate reaction. There's a pause. A beat of silence that feels just long enough to register but not long enough to be awkward. That tiny delay is powerful because it suggests something most people don't project in the moment. Deliberation. It's as if he's running an internal scan before deciding how to respond, weighing whether it's worth responding at all or how much of himself he wants to reveal in that response. Even if the pause is only a second or two, the effect is noticeable. The person speaking to him, and often others nearby, will instinctively look again, waiting to see what comes next. This micro-delay also shifts the power dynamic. Instant reactions can signal eagerness, agreement, or the desire to please, all of which subtly place the responder in a position of seeking rapport. By pausing, the Sigma flips that expectation. He isn't rushing to fill the silence or to smooth over the moment. Instead, the conversation runs on his timing, which places quiet control in his hands without any overt dominance play. The intrigue deepens because people can't tell what's happening in that split-second gap. Are they being evaluated? Is he amused but not showing it? Did their words not register as intended? That uncertainty lingers, making them watch more closely for clues. And when the Sigma finally does respond, the weight of that pause makes his words or expressions feel more deliberate, even if they're simple. Over time, this pattern creates a subtle reputation. He's not someone who reacts without thinking. That makes people tread a little more carefully around him, choosing their words with more intention. And while they're doing that, they're also keeping an extra eye on him. Because every pause feels like it might reveal something important, even if it never does. Number 11, they radiate unreachable, even in close proximity. A Sigma male can be physically close enough to hear every word, catch every expression, and even share the same small space. Yet somehow, there's still a gap you can't quite cross. It's not that he's unfriendly or dismissive. He may even be polite, attentive, or conversational. But there's an invisible layer between him and everyone else, a kind of private boundary that isn't about walls or hostility. It's about sovereignty over his inner world. Most people, when they're near others, unconsciously open small doors. They give off warmth, lean in slightly, offer micro-signals of shared space and connection. A Sigma doesn't open those doors unless there's a reason. He can stand beside you, engage in dialogue, and still keep the core of himself untouched. It's not coldness, it's containment. And that containment is rare enough to feel almost alien in a culture obsessed with oversharing and constant access. The paradox is that this doesn't repel people, it draws them in. Humans are naturally curious about barriers. When someone's presence suggests you're here but you're not in, the mind starts looking for ways to close the distance. That's where the second glance comes in. People check back, consciously or not, to see if the Sigma's demeanor has shifted, if that invisible distance has shortened, if they've somehow been granted entry. The more they check and find the same calm, contained energy, the more the intrigue builds. It's like holding a conversation with someone whose words are open but whose thoughts remain locked away. You're aware there's more beneath the surface. You just can't access it without an invitation. This unreachable quality also shifts social dynamics. In a world where most people are subtly competing for acknowledgement and intimacy, the Sigma's refusal to play makes him the one others are working to impress, to connect with, to understand. He isn't withholding as a tactic, he's simply not built to hand over his essence on demand. So even in close proximity, the Sigma remains just out of reach. And that quiet, consistent distance becomes a magnet, because people can't resist trying to step into a place they've never been allowed to stand. Number 12, they change the mood without participating. A Sigma male doesn't have to speak, move dramatically, or do anything outwardly attention-grabbing to change a room. The shift happens the moment he arrives. Conversations might not stop entirely, but they subtly adjust. People recalibrate their tone, their posture, even their choice of words, often without realizing they're doing it. It's the social equivalent of a cloud passing over the sun, not disruptive enough to halt everything, but noticeable enough that everyone feels it. This isn't because he's commanding the room with force or charisma in the traditional sense. It's because his presence doesn't sync with the pre-existing energy. And people are instinctively sensitive to changes in the emotional temperature of their environment. If the room is loud and light-hearted, his grounded stillness can create a strange contrast that slows things down. If the atmosphere is tense, his calm neutrality can make the tension either sharpen or dissolve, depending on how others react to it. Part of this effect comes from the fact that he isn't trying to match anyone. Most people, even unconsciously, adapt their demeanor to blend into the mood already established. A Sigma simply doesn't. That unblended presence stands out, and people start adjusting to him instead. It's not a conscious choice, it's an instinctive attempt to regain equilibrium in a space that suddenly feels different. Another layer is that people are constantly scanning for social cues, and a Sigma gives very few. That lack of cues creates an openness where others project their own interpretations. Some might feel challenged, others intrigued, and some may become hyper-aware of themselves. The mood shift is less about what he does and more about what his presence prompts in everyone else. It's why he can influence the room without speaking a word. His very existence becomes a reference point, a fixed element that others can't help but respond to. And because he isn't actively trying to sway the atmosphere, the change feels organic rather than manipulative. That's what makes it powerful. People leave the room knowing it felt different after he arrived, even if they can't explain why. And in most cases, that unspoken effect lingers long after he's gone. Every stare a Sigma male attracts isn't just about appearance. It's the collision between predictable human behavior and something that refuses to be predictable. He's the still figure in a moving crowd, the unsolved equation in a room full of obvious answers, the presence that shifts the air without lifting a finger. People don't always know why they're watching him, only that he's breaking some silent rule of social alignment, and their brains can't look away until they've made sense of it, which never really happens. In a society where everyone's broadcasting need, seeking approval, and adjusting to fit the room, the Sigma remains untuned to the frequency. And that mismatch is magnetic. He doesn't feed the eyes on him, but he doesn't repel them either. He simply exists, wholly self-contained, and in doing so, becomes the point of gravity that every other presence unconsciously orbits. That's why the stares linger. Not because he demands them, but because he quietly reminds people of something rare. The true presence doesn't ask for attention. It commands it without trying. And in a world addicted to noise, that kind of silence is impossible to ignore. If you found yourself hooked by these insights into why Sigma males draw so many stares, don't just disappear into the algorithm's void. Stick around. Hit that subscribe button so you don't miss the next deep dive like this video if it sparked something in you, and drop a comment sharing which point hit you the hardest. And if you know someone who needs to understand this, go ahead and share it, because good content is meant to travel, not sit quietly in the corner.